Before we get started, I want to give a huge thanks to Mubi for sponsoring this video. Mubi is a curated streaming service dedicated to elevating great cinema from all around the globe. Get a whole month free at mubi.com/bekindrewind. In 2022, Michelle Yeoh appeared in an episode of GQ's series on YouTube in which actors break down their most iconic characters. Toward the end of the interview, she discussed why her most recent role as Evelyn Wong in Everything Everywhere All at Once felt like such an important milestone in her career.
When I read the script, I thought, this is something, oh dear. No, this is something I've been waiting for a long time. That's going to give me the opportunity to show my fans, my family, my audience, what I'm capable of. To be funny, to be real, to be sad. Finally, somebody understood that I can do all these things.
Shortly after the episode went live, this clip went semi-viral, with fans pouring out their love and expressing excitement for Yeoh, as they should in the exhausting, oftentimes disingenuous slog that is award season. What a genuinely touching and vulnerable moment. She truly seemed existentially relieved that finally, after decades in the industry, she was trusted with a lead role to explore the full range of her acting abilities. Because for so long, Michelle Yeoh, the actress, was given a very one-dimensional persona.
Run up the tree and kick their ass.
Oh, I'm sure she'll kick ass.
Kick in the butt.
Kick butts.
We have a scene of you kicking a little butt here.
She was just an action star who kicks butt. Fast forward to a year after that interview, a year in which Everything Everywhere All at Once took the country by storm, to Michelle Yeoh taking the stage to accept the Best Actress Oscar, becoming the first Asian actress and only second woman of color to win the award. A lot had to happen and change for this moment to occur, and that's what I hope to explore in this video. I want to be very clear and careful about my scope here. Asian cinema is not my area of expertise, and the last thing I want to do is sloppily apply American terminology, perspectives, or critiques to those industries. So I'm going to give some basic background on Yeoh's career in Hong Kong, but primarily focus on her through the American lens. When did Yeoh first enter Hollywood's consciousness, and how was she discussed when she did? What does her win mean for women of color moving forward? To help me answer those questions and further elaborate on how we might think about the success of films like Everything Everywhere All at Once, I've brought in sociologist Nancy Wong Yoon, author of the book Real Inequality, which examines the structural barriers minorities face in Hollywood while shedding light on how they survive in a racist industry.
Miss Malaysia tonight is Yeoh Chu King.
My name is Yeoh Chu King. I'm a graduate and I come from Ipoh.
Let's quickly cover some background first. Michelle Yeoh was born in Malaysia before moving to the United Kingdom to study ballet. After an injury put her future as a ballerina into question, she turned her attention to other creative arts. In 1983, she won the Miss Malaysia competition and shortly afterward had her first professional acting job in a commercial with Jackie Chan. Her film debut came the next year in The Owl vs. Bumbo, starring and directed by legendary Hong Kong actor and martial artist Sammo Hung. It was during this film that Yeoh realized that she could repurpose the skills she had developed as a dancer in action films. Her discipline, natural athleticism, and ability to learn choreography gave her the perfect toolkit to learn martial arts, so she took to the gym for 6 to 8 hours a day to train with stuntmen and professional martial artists. It was 1985's Yes, Madam, just her third film, that proved her instinct unquestionably correct. She plays a cop assigned to solve a murder case and locate a missing microfilm that will incriminate the leader of a criminal organization. I highly recommend you check it out if you're able. It's currently streaming on the Criterion channel, and while I'm sure it won't be for everyone, its manic pacing, balletic fight scenes, delightfully 1980s hairstyles, and wacky sense of humor had me absolutely enthralled. It also makes total sense why this film launched Yeoh, then known as Michelle Khan, into stardom. She's such a composed presence, very convincing authority figure, deft with humor and not to mention physicality. It's wild to consider that this woman had not trained professionally in martial arts for most of her life and did all of these stunts and learned to do all of that. Her next vehicle, Royal Warriors, again cast Yeoh as a cop, this time in a trio of agents who are targeted after they take down a plane hijacker. Then came Dynamite Fighters, which depicts Yeoh as an Indiana Jones-like figure fighting against Japanese occupation of China. In 1987, she briefly married the producer of many of her films and head of D&B Group, Dixon Poon, and briefly retired from acting, believing that she would enter a more traditional marriage and would prefer to give her full attention to that. However, the marriage was short-lived, and with her divorce, Yeoh came out of retirement with the first film that would bring her to the attention of American audiences in a mass way, although it was released a few years after its initial release in Hong Kong. Police Story 3 Super Cop, as you might have guessed by the title, is the third in a series starring Jackie Chan as Ka Kui of the Hong Kong police. He's sent to work undercover with Interpol Inspector Jessica Yang as siblings who infiltrate a drug ring. This is perhaps the film most often referenced when people talk about Michelle Yeoh doing her own stunt work, mostly because the things she does are insane, and even she cannot believe that she survived in making this film. Aside from that, though, she really couldn't have asked for a better return to the industry. To be partnered with Jackie Chan, then a global sensation, guaranteed a lot of eyes on her and a wide distribution. The film was well reviewed, and importantly, the reviews noted that Yeoh brought as much to the film as Chan did, framing her as a star of equal caliber. To the LA Times critic Kevin Thomas, she was as elegant as she is skilled in martial arts, and lots more disciplined than Chan. They're a terrific team. Rita Kempley wrote for the Washington Post, Chan seems to have met his soulmate in Khan, Asia's top female action star. Like Chan, Khan does her own fighting and stunts. Unlike the Hollywood action contingent, Chan and Khan don't rely on cinematic trickery. Theirs are not special effects, just spectacular ones. Later, when the film received a wide release in the United States, she made sure to emphasize how important this equality was in her interviews.
He's, of course, the #1 box office star in the world. And then he asked you to be sort of the, because I heard he wasn't so excited about having a woman martial arts. What happened with that?
He always has this saying that, women, please, women stay in the kitchen, stay at home, look after babies, except for Michelle. No, he's changed it. He's put Michelle in there now, or else I really kick his butt. He knows
right,
that.
Right. And you could, too.
Super Cop's success was enough to not only earn her a spin-off sequel, Super Cop 2, but also relaunch her career into perhaps its most prolific stage, except for, I guess, right now. From 1992 to 1997, Yeoh appeared in a series of vehicles that fully unleashed her star power. In the heroic trio, she teams up with a group of heroines to stop a menacing character who hides under the city. That one got a sequel too, Executioners, in which Yeoh, as Invisible Girl, finally accepts her fate as a true hero. The Soong Sisters, a sweeping historical drama, tells the true story of sisters who married figures who'd affected the course of China's history in the early 20th century. The stunt woman combined all the excitement of action sequences with the intrigue of the actors' behind-the-scenes lives, revealing the emotional and physical toll of that work, as well as the camaraderie that makes it all worth it. Starring alongside fellow legends Jet Li in Tai Chi Master and Donnie Yen in Wing Chun, she cemented her status as the true queen of the martial arts film. So by the mid-90s, she was enormously popular and the highest-paid actress in Hong Kong. Again, I need to shout out the Criterion Channel for making some films from this time accessible for viewers. Like I said, I don't think these films will be for everybody, but I had so much fun watching them. They're such a welcome change of pace from the American action film. I definitely had more fun than I did watching
We Think We Know Her, the Bond Girl. Sexy, silly, and subservient to 007.
Here!
Shoot him! Well, things are changing. Set your sights on Michelle Yeoh.
James Bond was facing a bit of an identity crisis. After all, it was the 1990s, a notoriously kind decade to women. Bond couldn't shamelessly objectify them anymore. 007 had to adapt to new political and social realities, so the film's producers actively began thinking of ways to modernize the franchise. Michelle Yeoh became crucial to this plan. Director Roger Spottiswoode told the New York Times, "I wanted a contemporary woman who has her own point of view. Michelle fulfills everything I was looking for. Very strong, without being manly, a very centered, extraordinarily gifted athlete of a particular kind." So the movie's writers rewrote the Bond character as a Chinese woman, and Tomorrow Never Dies, as we know it, was born. In the film, James Bond investigates a media mogul who wants to orchestrate a war between China and Britain so that his media companies can profit from the coverage. While on his mission, Bond meets Wai Lin, an agent assigned to the same investigation only by the Chinese government. In the interest of international peace, the two agents team up and defeat the mogul before a war can begin. The plot is both scarily prescient of our current media climate and terrifyingly 90s.
I hacked into the mainframe at the bank. They're using an SSL2 encryption, 128.
Spare me the techno-babble, please.
But as Spottiswoode intended, the film differentiated itself from its predecessors through the characterization of Wai Lin in two major ways. First, rather than the scantily clad Bond girl falling hopelessly in love with Bond before becoming a damsel in distress, Yeoh fights alongside him as an equal. She's a professional who is an active participant in the mission and isn't interested in his romantic advances, at least until the very end. Toby Miller, a professor of cinema studies at NYU, told the New York Times, "The time that would have been spent in the past establishing the relationship between Bond and Bond girl goes to letting her have her own fight scenes. There are 3 to 4 minutes of Michelle Yeoh fighting. Normally that would have been 3 to 4 minutes of her staring into his eyes. She doesn't need Bond's approval or protection." The second way Wai Lin differentiated herself from Bond girl's past was by largely avoiding common Asian stereotypes. Where in previous Bond entries, Chinese characters were demonized as scary communists, Wai Lin is an ally who can politely taunt the West.
But every now and then, you get to sail on a beautiful evening like this, and sometimes work with a decadent agent of a corrupt Western power.
Asian women in Bond films were also stereotyped as overtly sexual and evil dragon ladies.
Why do Chinese girls taste different from all other girls?
Writing about Tsai Chin's role in You Only Live Twice for the New York Times, Jennifer Tung explained, "Bond Ling was the amalgam of every Chinese female stereotype, a submissive sex nymph speaking in breathy, broken English, and a calculating dragon lady. She's also the only representation of Asian women in film or television that I remember from my childhood." For her part, Yeoh was very aware of this and proud of the difference that she represented.
And for me, as an Asian, as a Chinese character, to come on and be an equal to Bond in that way was such a good statement for us. I think in many people's minds, it was always the Susie Kwan era, you know. Sure. It was always a very stereotypical.
You Only Live Twice, to point at the Bond franchise.
Right. So, we have to make a difference. I think people also have to see Asian women not just
stronger,
right,
self-aware
as
women.
Everybody else, as every other woman on the planet.
Tomorrow Never Dies did very well at the box office, although had the misfortune of its numbers being compared to the other box office smash that year, Titanic. It was not, however, well reviewed. Critics broadly deemed it a run-of-the-mill action film, but considered Yeoh, as the LA Times put it, the only place where an updating has been successful. Most importantly for this video, Tomorrow Never Dies solidified the Yeoh persona for Americans, which draws heavily on her persona in Hong Kong cinema. 1, she is first and foremost an action hero, known for her martial arts skills. Bet on her in any combat scene. 2, she's rarely sexualized in stereotypical ways. The camera doesn't gawk at her, she is costumed in clothes that are functional, not needlessly revealing. She doesn't offer sex freely or quickly. And 3, she's portrayed as deeply competent, often in contrast to a male counterpart. This also gives her persona a feminist/girl power slant, in that she can not only keep up with the boys, but also put them in their place if necessary. Because Tomorrow Never Dies reached a global audience in a way that her films never had before, and because the American market and industry were so much larger and well-resourced than the Hong Kong market, Yeoh saw this film as an opportunity for growth. As the Times noted, for Yeoh herself, Tomorrow Never Dies is a ticket to the Hollywood mainstream, one she hopes will open doors to dramatic, comic, and romantic vehicles as well as action fare. If it does, she'll be breaking a tradition maintained by the many actresses whose careers went nowhere after 007. But roles didn't come as quickly and easily as Yeoh would have liked, and I'm sure you can guess the reason. In 2008, she told The Guardian, "You would think I would have been working nonstop after Tomorrow Never Dies, but my next Western film wasn't until Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon 3 years later. Why? Because no one was offering me the roles I wanted. It was still the same old stereotypes. If you look at my CV, there's not a big repertoire. Things are getting better now, but the same problem still arises sometimes. When I told my agent I wanted to work with Danny Boyle on Sunshine, he said, "That's not really a role for an Asian face." But that's the thing. I'm not an Asian face. I'm an actress. That's what we need to overcome. Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon tells the story of Li Mubai, a swordsman who surrenders his legendary sword, Green Destiny, so that he may retire from a life of constant violence. Xu Lian, his colleague, friend, and would-be romantic partner, takes the sword to another estate where it is stolen by Yu Jiaolong, a young woman who is to be married against her will and who secretly has been training as a martial artist for most of her life. Li Mubai and Xu Lian seek to regain the sword and help the young woman find a better path in life. Sony Pictures Classics conducted a savvy advertising campaign for Crouching Tiger, targeting specific communities they thought might be interested in the film. Everyone from hip-hop artists who enjoyed martial arts films to the Y2K version of internet teens. This led to strong word-of-mouth recommendations, and soon it became clear that this film had a much wider audience appeal than anyone had initially expected. Young people who'd just seen The Matrix enjoyed the fight scenes, older women enjoyed its poignant romance, young women enjoyed its feminist themes, the New York Times compared it to Buffy, LOL, and cinephiles enjoyed the disruptive and sometimes microscopic bumps in social interactions that director Ang Lee had become known for in his work. Ultimately, Crouching Tiger performed exceedingly well at the box office and surpassed Life is Beautiful to become the most successful foreign film of all time in the United States. It's worth noting that this film wasn't discussed as just another martial arts/action film from Asia. It was sold as a westernized version of the Chinese wuxia film, with Lee making specific creative choices to make the genre more palatable to American audiences. So to American critics, Lee elevated the genre, plucking Hong Kong-style action-adventure out of its generic niche and lifting it into elegant, lyrical cinematic poetry. It was a comedy of manners, Sense and Sensibility with a body count, the first truly highbrow martial arts film. Again, I don't know enough about wuxia films to know whether it's fair to characterize this film as more worthy of merit, but I wanted to note it because while I think it's correct to characterize Crouching Tiger as something other than a straightforward kung fu movie, there is a certain smugness in rating the westernized version as superior. Yeoh received excellent reviews for her turn as Xu Lian. She gave one of the most adult and deeply felt performances ever seen in such a movie, and glimmered with quiet dignity. Xu Lian fits neatly into the persona Yeoh established in Tomorrow Never Dies. She's not sexualized, in fact the opposite, she's repressed, and characterized as a competent professional. This role, though, elaborates on the feminist aspect of her persona. Here she not only keeps up with the guys, but also acts as a would-be mentor figure, an older sister type willing to take another woman under her wing and guide her, although things don't quite work out that way. She also, of course, kicks major ass. This stuff is impressive. And keep in mind, Yeoh tore her ACL at the beginning of this production. That's the kind of injury that renders professional athletes useless for 6 months, and she came back after 2 weeks and kept filming. Her leg was literally elevated to accommodate her injury during this scene. Are you kidding me? Now, I didn't really discuss Yeoh's media coverage when Tomorrow Never Dies was released. I wanted to hold off doing so because it is almost identical to her coverage for Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, the only substantial difference being the actual films she had to discuss. A majority of questions posed to Michelle Yeoh in every single interview has to do with martial arts. Does she do her own stunt work? Did she study the craft? How does one learn to absorb a blow? What is the craziest thing she's ever done? When she responds yes, she does her own stunts, and everything you see is her, including that time she drove a motorcycle onto the back of a moving train. The natural follow-up question is about her injuries, which she breezily lists as if they're no big deal at all.
I dislocated my shoulder, I ruptured an artery, I fractured my ribs, I look like I'm covered in bruises, I look like someone's thrown me down 5 flights of stairs 10 times over. That's about it. Other than that, I'm fine.
I'm in danger.
She's also often asked to demonstrate or perform martial arts.
But can you leave us with a little kick? People sing us off the show, but can you show me a little kick,
I will
something?
try.
You gotta punch me in the chest. Just punch me in the chest. Let me see. Don't punch me hard. Don't punch me hard. Don't hurt me.
Oh! Ow! Ow!
You told me this?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh! I think we all heard that. Can I just tell you something? That really hurt.
Look, I get it. She has a fascinating, somewhat inconceivable talent, one that very few famous actors in the United States have, and her roles put this skill set front and center, so it makes sense why journalists would ask about it. But repeating this line of questioning over and over and over hollows out her persona. You begin to think of Yeoh as a technician or a stunt person, rather than an actor. To be clear, being considered a stunt person isn't an insult or a bad thing in and of itself. Oscar for best stunts when? But it doesn't seem to be how she wanted to be labeled.
Whenever we did press conferences or things, and whenever people would say, oh yeah, Michelle Yeoh, the action actor, and he goes like, she's not just an action actor, she's an actress, okay? Just stop right there.
Still, I don't think the reason she's asked these questions again and again is quite as straightforward as curiosity about the novelty of her talent. What I think it actually reveals is that because Yeoh was entering a market in which she was largely unfamiliar to audiences and likely to many critics, journalists weren't equipped to adequately contextualize or discuss Yeoh's career, so they simply asked her the easiest, jazziest thing and called it a day. Sure, some people got it.
Hello, I'm Steve Tartaglia, and I'm kneeling before the Queen of Kung Fu.
But you can kind of tell most people are a little lost at sea. Here's Yeoh talking about this very issue.
They were quite insular. They never looked beyond their backyard. Most of them never even traveled out of their country. So for me to say I'm a Malaysian, they still think, oh, okay, where the heck is Malaysia? First of all, no idea. Then, oh, Japan. It's like, no, Malaysia's not Japan. So it was an interesting process. It's quite humbling because, you know, I came from Hong Kong, and at that time, I had done movies with Jackie. You know, I was also quite well known as a very well-regarded action actress. And suddenly when you go to a place where they don't quite know who you are, but they were told that you are quite important and quite well known, so then they sort of feel that they have to take you into consideration.
You can see this play out in other ways too. In print interviews from this time, there's a startling lack of specificity with respect to Yeoh. She'll often be described kind of parenthetically, just in a clause that tidily sums up who she is without any further information. So, Michelle Yeoh, one of Hong Kong's top female action stars, and that's it. Articles about her often don't include her name in the headline, or maybe they do include her name just in a smaller font at the bottom, or maybe they'll spell her name wrong. The film is always the selling point, and sometimes they can't even get that right.
Coming up, the star of the new movie, Crouching Dragon, Hidden
Crouching Dragon, Hidden Tiger.
Hidden Tiger, okay. Anyway, she's up next.
It's such a subtle form of exclusion. That willingness to eschew her identity or give her context shows such a condescending lack of respect and reflects the troubling reality that in coming to the United States, Yeoh didn't just go from a market where she wasn't as widely known. She also entered a culture where she was suddenly considered a minority and had to deal with all of the suppression and stereotyping that Asians experience in the United States. There were very blatant examples that you might unfortunately expect.
And the first thing he said to me was, wow, you speak pretty good English. Very slowly he speaks to me. I said, yes, it was a long journey coming out here. I had 13 hours, so I learned on the plane.
And there were the thoroughly awkward imitations of martial arts sold as comedy.
You killed my master!
Grasshopper, can you take the stone from my hand?
So when we're thinking about Michelle Yeoh during the press corps for Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, one of the best reviewed, most popular films of the year, you begin to see some obvious limitations. She's mostly an action star, kind of close to a stunt person who is apparently famous in Asia. And I know she's in this very popular movie, but I can't remember what her name is. I think she was in James Bond. To speak about Michelle Yeoh in such narrow terms sells her performance short, especially in scenes like this one. It also robs her of the privilege of a narrative. Besides talent, allegedly, narrative and name recognition are arguably the two most important things a person can possibly have during award season. 2 things Michelle Yeoh was not given, and 2 things that the eventual Best Actress winner that year had in spades. Julia Roberts, whose smile has made her arguably the most popular actress in movies today and a box office tour de force, played against type in Erin Brockovich, a dramatization of a woman's real-life battle against a gas and electric company that contaminated groundwater in California. Transforming from the queen of rom-coms into a very serious, politically relevant capital A actress, Roberts had a compelling story, and by the time the nominations were announced, she essentially had the win too. As one paper put it, the other Best Actress nominees might as well stay home on March 25th. Only a cataclysm, perhaps an asteroid striking Earth, will keep Julia Roberts from winning her first Oscar for Erin Brockovich. The other Best Actress nominees that year were Joan Allen in The Contender, Juliette Binoche in Chocolat, Ellen Burstyn in Requiem for a Dream, and Laura Linney in You Can Count on Me. Yeoh was occasionally predicted as a nominee and considered a snub when the nomination didn't happen. But is it really surprising that she was left out? Given everything I've said already, not really. And distressingly, this treatment isn't exclusive to Yeoh.
Hollywood has a history of that, right? So The Last Emperor, also a huge award winner, but none of the actors were nominated. Slumdog Millionaire, Parasite. With Parasite, a lot of the journalists, and myself included, really remarked on how strange it was that it got so many awards, right? I think it won both Best Picture and Best International Film and Best Director, but none of the actors were nominated. I still remember Charlize Theron was interviewed. She's like, I just love them. I love all of them. And she couldn't name a single actor because she didn't know how to pronounce Asian names. And I think that that's part of, the racism that Asian Americans have faced in the United States, that they're seen as interchangeable. People can't, quote unquote, can't tell the difference. And because they have names, even though they're very simple names, they're not necessarily very complex. We learn how to say Timothy Chalamet. And so I think we can figure out how to say, Song Kang-ho, right? Which is just 3 syllables. And he was the lead in Parasite. And so I think that Asian actors, Asian American actors have had a very hard time in being nominated.
These are the consequences of coverage like this. Legends lose their complexity only to be breezed over when it comes to giving them attention they rightly deserve for films everybody agrees are pretty great. As with anything, Hollywood saw something that worked and wondered how they could replicate it. Everybody's looking to make the next Crouching Tiger, said Barbara Robinson, the managing director of Columbia Pictures film production in Asia. It's the same as if you had a hugely successful volcano movie. You suddenly get 3 movies about volcanoes. Yeah, exactly the same. Anyway, there's a brief surge in Asian dramas in the United States. Hero, House of Flying Daggers, and of course, Memoirs of a Geisha. Between Crouching Tiger and Memoirs of a Geisha, Michelle Yeoh made only 2 films, The Touch, which was never released in American theaters, and Silverhawk, which I think should win some kind of award for most early 2000s costuming.
That's it? I'm just warming up. Oh, come on, let's go. 10 more minutes.
Memoirs of a Geisha brought her back into the American film industry's consciousness, reuniting with Zhang Zi in the story of a young girl who is sold to a geisha house in pre-World War II Japan. The film, as with Crouching Tiger, casts Yeoh as a mentor figure to the younger Zhang, again building on her established persona, although significantly this time, without any combat. This was an intentional move for Yeoh.
I wanted so much to be part of this, and when I heard that Rob Marshall was casting for it, I guess I just called my agent 50 times a day and I think, did you get me in there, Lee? Come on, Stallman, get your ass moving, okay? I want to meet Rob Marshall.
Right.
And fortunately, the phone call came. And when you want something so bad, but you have, like a lot of people, I think when they look at me, they see all the action films that I've done. I needed to make sure that when I walked through the room, I wasn't an action figure.
Here she would be emotionally, not just physically, strong and tough, a move she hoped would bring her more dramatic opportunities. Memoirs of a Geisha was considerably less popular than Crouching Tiger, and having recently watched it, I am not surprised to have learned this. Manohla Dargis wrote in her review for the New York Times, Mr. Marshall can't rescue the film from its embarrassing screenplay or its awkward Chinese-Japanese Hollywood culture clash. But Memoirs of a Geisha is one of those bad Hollywood films that by virtue of their production values, nonetheless affords a few dividends. In this case, fabulous clothes and 3 eminently watchable female leads. The film received 6 Oscar nominations, mostly for those production values, although again, none for acting. Part of this had to do with the controversy regarding its casting of Chinese and Malaysian actors as Japanese women. The Chinese government went so far as to cancel the release of this film entirely because of this issue. Japanese audiences weren't enthusiastic either because they weren't interested in having their culture explained to them through Western eyes. Said one Japanese professor, "It's the American version of what America wants to imagine it's like in Japan." After all, the book Memoirs of a Geisha was written by a white guy from Kentucky, so yeah, this isn't the film I'd watch for a nuanced portrait of Japanese womanhood. Worth noting here that Crouching Tiger was released in China but flopped because audiences thought an Americanized version of a Wu Xia film was silly. Between the success of this film and Crouching Tiger, journalists began asking Yeoh if she intended to stay in the United States to work or if she wanted to go back to Asia and continue her career there. She insisted these weren't mutually exclusive options and expressed hope that barriers between these industries could continue to fall away and that she could have a truly international career.
I just started my own production company back in Hong Kong, actually. I think the world is getting to be such a small place that we can cross over very, very easily. My family's back in Asia, so I won't uproot and come and live out here, but I love to come back and work.
Michelle Yeoh from Crouching Tiger, Eating Dragons, Smelling Dragon, whatever she is so beautiful.
To be fair, for the next decade, she did this pretty successfully, returning to China for films like Reign of Assassins, but also coming to the United States for films like The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor. Do you think she and Brendan Fraser ever would have guessed? She was very selective about what she wanted to do, making sure that roles fit with her sensibilities and didn't adhere to egregious stereotypes. Yeoh was consistently working, but not anything that would draw major mainstream attention in the United States. At least until... Of all the interviews I read or watched with Michelle Yeoh from the early 90s all the way to the early 2010s, I don't recall a single time in which anyone asked her about quote-unquote Asian representation or equal opportunities for Asian actors or anything that we really think about when we talk about representational or identity politics. She mentioned it.
Who would have the guts? Which studio would have the guts to turn around and say, okay, we'll support an all-Asian cast and we're not all A-list, we're not A-list actors.
And the Memoirs of a Geisha controversy came close, but mostly the mainstream press weren't paying attention to those conversations. This is despite the fact that a report from the scholars in the USC Annenberg School of Communication and Journalism found that among the 800 most popular movies from 2007 to 2015, only 4.8% of speaking or named roles were played by an Asian or Asian American actor, and not one lead or co-lead was played by an Asian or Asian American actor. However, by 2018, the media landscape had changed to such a degree that it would be almost impossible not to have that conversation, especially regarding a film that was set to break a long-standing, ugly trend in Hollywood. That year, Crazy Rich Asians became the first film to feature an entirely Asian American ensemble in a contemporary setting since the Joy Luck Club in 1993. It was lost on no one, not the film's producers, actors, director, what a significant milestone this was. But because it was a milestone, there was also enormous pressure on the film's success. I don't think any movie wants to have to carry the weight on its shoulders in terms of, if this movie doesn't work, is this a big stumbling block for this kind of film? Box office analyst Paul Dergarabedian told The Hollywood Reporter. But I think studios are learning that the biggest risks can reap the biggest rewards. As the film's producer, Nina Jacobson, pointed out, the risk had paid off for Black Panther, and films like that can change the whole economics of the business. And change the business it did. Crazy Rich Asians was a home run. The film grossed over $230 million on a $30 million budget as of October 2018, making it the most successful romantic comedy in the last 10 years and the 6th most successful of all time.
I think that Crazy Rich Asians was a turning point in many ways because it made a lot of money with relatively unknown stars. So I think Hollywood has always thought that Asian Americans, even Asians, don't have the box office draw. That was one of the excuses given to casting Scarlett Johansson in Ghost in the Shell because they didn't see an Asian actress carrying that film. And so Crazy Rich Asians really destroyed that theory because Constance Wu, who was known but from television, Fresh Off the Boat, and Henry Golding, who's now a huge star, he wasn't even an actor. I think he was a travel show host in Asia. And so stars can be made. What I've always found frustrating is that young white actors, unknowns, can always be thought of as, ingenues and starlets that can be, fostered and become huge stars, but not people of color, right? Like, especially not Asians. They don't get that same opportunity. So many Asian Americans working in the industry, whether it's actually in the movie making or just film critics and writers, were drawing attention to it because we felt like this is the moment. Because if this film does well, we all knew that it could have the potential to open up space, consideration. But I've talked to Asian American friends who are directors, and they said they were still having a hard time. And there were Asian American actors who were still being told to do roles in an accent, So it's not like all of a sudden, bam, Hollywood woke up and became non-racist and non-xenophobic. There's still all of that still going on, but I think that there were opportunities opened up, and I think that I saw a lot of television streaming shows greenlit just recently. So I do freelance work and I get pitched a lot of Asian American projects because that's what I like to write about. And for the first time this last week, actually, there are more projects than I could write on. Like more projects that were in my queue that I hadn't even seen because I had so many things to talk about and write about. And that is now. And I think, not coincidentally, it's coinciding with, Everything Everywhere All at Once doing well. And so, so I think Crazy Rich Asians was one of the things that really opened up.
To a new generation of critics who'd grown up with Crouching Tiger, who were more attuned to the significance of a film like this, her coverage took a more nuanced tenor. Framed as a matriarch who'd been fighting the good fight, literally and metaphorically, for decades, she spoke to how the industry had changed over time and advocated a continued push toward diversity. She told Harper's Bazaar, "It's been a long battle with me right from the beginning, just to even find roles that are representations of strong women. It was a trickle before, and this film will turn it into a stream because I think we need it." She was also given more space to actually explain her acting choices, to unpack the stoic Eleanor and how she worked with director John Chu to shape the character. Crazy Rich Asians was an opportunity to revisit her filmography and lift her up to the mainstream queenly status so often freely bestowed to white actresses in her peer group, and so richly deserved for a master of her craft. Undoubtedly, the film opened doors in a way that none of her previous vehicles had. After its success, she became part of some of the biggest properties there are in the United States, like Star Trek Discovery, Marvel's Shang-Chi. She's done a number of Netflix releases, including The Witcher, voice work in probably the greatest cinematic event of 2022, Minions: Rise of Gru. And it seems this will only continue with Wicked and 3 Avatar films coming up. You really can't get a bigger stage than that, a truly unprecedented achievement for a 60-year-old Asian woman in Hollywood. And yet, big as those things are, they aren't really Michelle Yeoh star vehicles. And in many ways, they lean on a familiar type for her, the impossibly regal, composed leader who's tough as nails and could probably kill you. She needed a lead role to show off the heights of what she can really do. In 2022, she got one. I would be shocked if anyone watching this video hasn't already seen Everything Everywhere All at Once, so I won't summarize it. Also because, wow, that is not an easy movie to summarize. Everything Everywhere All at Once is the culmination, but also the expansion of the Yeoh persona. Evelyn is, of course, given kung fu abilities by the multiverse and becomes a superhero in her own right, so we get to see the action sequences that made audiences fall in love with Yeoh decades ago. Evelyn isn't sexualized, obviously, but I think it's important to note that the film doesn't make her asexual because she's an older woman. She is depicted as a glamorous object of romantic desire, and even though she's in the Hot Dog Fingers universe and it's played for comedy, she's shown doing a kind of seduction ritual. The first quarter of the film or so emphasizes Evelyn's competence by contrasting her with Waymond, who can't seem to keep up with the demands of their business. But there are new shades to her competence here. While the film clearly frames her as capable, she isn't infallible or calmly controlled. She's frazzled and overwhelmed. Alexandra Kleeman wrote in a profile of Yeoh, "It's the first time audiences will see Yeoh play someone whose movements are uncertain, someone with abundant gray hair, someone whose body struggles to do what she asks of it. And for the first time, she's being called upon to loosen the elegance and poise that has defined her career so far, and let her own electric, slightly neurotic personality slip through." And finally, there's Evelyn's relationship with her daughter, Joy. While not Yeoh's first turn as a semi-antagonistic maternal figure, their dynamic involves a number of layers that complicate the role to a degree that I don't think you see in Yeoh's other work. Generational conflict, sexuality, immigrant assimilation, mental health. There's a lot going on, and she does it gracefully. Ultimately, what this role does is explode the idea that Michelle Yeoh is just an action star. She doesn't have to be intimidatingly regal, as one journalist at NPR put it. She can be very funny. I mean, hell, if Last Christmas taught us anything, it's that her comedic instincts have been underutilized for her entire career. Again, Kleeman. The effect is liberating, cathartic. It feels as if Yeoh, this Swiss Army knife of actors, has unleashed in herself the ability to inhabit each of her diverse modes of performance simultaneously, to be everything all at once, as she stakes claim over a space that has traditionally been designated for the celebration of young, muscular male bodies. If you haven't caught on by now, Hollywood has a habit of thinking that Michelle Yeoh's films will do okay at the box office when time and time again they become audience favorites that vastly overperform everyone's expectations. Everything Everywhere All at Once is no exception, and we can see a lot of parallels to the reception of Crouching Tiger. Just as with that film, word of mouth recommendations played a huge role in the success of Everything Everywhere. According to GQ, exit surveys conducted early in the run revealed that 46% of the film's audience turned out because they heard it was good. Just like Crouching Tiger, it managed to blend genres in a way that meant it could appeal to a wide array of audiences. Genuinely and wildly original, it was the kung fu, science fiction, metaphysical action comedy that you didn't know you needed, but just might love. The film earned over $100 million at the box office, making it not only a sleeper hit, but also A24's highest grossing film ever, and still counting, which prompted theatrical re-releases with a new introduction from the filmmakers and 8 minutes of outtakes. So although it was released in April of 2022, not a typical window for awards consideration, by July, A24 began planning a publicity push for awards season. Very early on, it became clear that the race for Best Actress boiled down to Yeoh and Cate Blanchett for Tar, despite a few shake-ups in the lineup. Here's where I want to bring back this article, an example I used from the Crouching Tiger days when Michelle Yeoh didn't even get her name in the headline of an article in the health section of the LA Times. If we pull back, we realize that this is also the year Cate Blanchett earned her first Academy Award nomination for Elizabeth. These two women had very different journeys to get to this moment right here. This one image doesn't tell the whole story, but I think it's a good visual symbol of how much things have changed and how hard Yeoh had to work to reach some semblance of an equal opportunity. What an arc that is. After 23 years, Michelle Yeoh had a lead role, a multi-dimensional script, no pun intended, and a clear narrative. As good as Cate Blanchett's performance in Tar was, and as much as some people might have been obsessed with it, some people as me, I'm talking about myself, Michelle Yeoh's performance seemed to meet the cultural moment, and her nomination came with a much more compelling campaign story than anything Blanchett could have conjured. It, of course, didn't hurt that Everything Everywhere All at Once was extremely popular with the Academy and swept the evening with 7 awards. Obviously, her win also brought another momentous milestone. Michelle Yeoh became the first Asian woman and only the second woman of color to win this award.
You have spent almost 4 decades in film, and now at age 59, this is the first time that you have ever gotten top billing in a Hollywood movie. What does that feel like at this moment in your career?
It's like finally we have our moment. And thank God it didn't come a moment too soon. No, I think I've waited, and I think not just me, there's so many of us that looks like me, like you, who are still waiting for the opportunities. I think the tide has turned, but we also need to be responsible, good storytellers, and seize the opportunities that are presented now for women, for diversity, but don't let it just be lip service. It has to mean something.
To elaborate on the significance of this moment, I'd like to turn it over to Nancy Wong Yoon.
I'm wondering your general take. Do you have any initial memories of Michelle Yeoh when you first heard about her, or the films or moments that have resonated with you over the years?
So I saw Michelle Yeoh on the same plane as Jackie Chan as a kid because I grew up in Taiwan and I would go back every summer. And so in Asia, she's huge, right? And so, but it wasn't until Crouching Tiger and also I think James Bond where I realized, oh, she's someone who wants to, just like Jackie Chan, right? Because Jackie Chan did the Rush Hour films. So here are these Asian stars that I grew up with now making inroads into Hollywood, and it's exciting, right? But I think I really was excited about Michelle Yeoh because Crouching Tiger was just a fantastic movie, and An Lee is a Taiwanese American filmmaker, and I think that his movies are just really beautiful, and I was really drawn to that. I was a huge cinephile as a young person, and so I was really proud. Not that I wasn't proud of Jackie Chan, but he does martial arts comedies, right? And, that's huge. It probably has a, bigger box office appeal than indie films. But I really appreciated the artistry that Michelle Yeoh brought. And she was in Memoirs of a Geisha. And I think I didn't think of it as that problematic when I was younger because I didn't know any different. Just seeing, a lot of beautiful Asian women on screen. I actually read the book and thought it was kind of enjoyable to read. But of course, looking back, oh my gosh, right? The geisha stereotype is so damaging to, misogyny, anti-Asian misogyny. And we definitely, Asian women paid the price for that. And during COVID, the anti-Asian violence, especially the Atlanta shootings where the guy literally said that I shot Asians because they're temptations, right? And this whole idea of that. And I know that Hollywood representations of Asian women only in that way perpetuates that stereotype. But Michelle Yeoh, I think she was so strong, but not, I think, Dragon Lady. She was very much not a stereotype. So Dragon Lady is another stereotype of Asian women villains, essentially the kind of Fu Manchu version, the woman version of that. So usually conniving, usually backstabbing, usually also very sexualized all at the same time. And Michelle Yeoh has never seemed that way to me. She always seemed very dignified, very highly skilled. She could kick your ass, but she's also complex and human. And I think that I loved her in Star Trek. And so, she's done a lot of interesting things in Hollywood.
In researching my video about Halle Berry's win, one quote that really stuck with me is something like, "We have to be sure this is a movement and not a moment." And clearly Halle Berry's win kind of was a moment rather than a movement. Do you think Michelle Yeoh's win has the potential to be a movement and actually, spawn more wins that aren't just for prestigious white ladies?
Oh God, I hope so. I think that A24 I joke that A24 should just be like Asian 24 because they were behind Minari, they were behind The Farewell. They've done a lot, right? They believed in Asian American independent filmmaking. And are studios going to follow suit? That I don't know, right? Because I think Everything Everywhere at Once could have been a studio film. When I see multiverse with people of color, I get so excited because it's like a a genre or a way of storytelling that allows for greater complexity. Because the one dimensionality of characters of color in Hollywood is just so boring. Not only is it racist, it's just so boring, right? In Hollywood, it's very different, I think, when you are a racial minority being exposed as human and more interesting than anyone has ever seen. I think that's just really kind of a intersection of great storytelling and political, social, cultural commentary, right? That can be done in an entertaining way, but I think all those undertones are always there. And I think for those of us who belong to those groups, a lot of us see it and are excited. But I think that people who don't belong to those groups also sense it, right? Because especially since they've never seen it before, but also I think it's exploding stereotypes. It's changing hearts and minds in ways that people don't even know, right? I mean, there's been resistance to it too. That's when you know it is doing something political because people are dismissing the film or, bothered by it because it doesn't conform to their racist stereotypes, right? And so I think that that's the power of storytelling. It's the power that Hollywood has in order to combat stereotypes. It doesn't obviously take it very often, but I think that's why directors, writers of color, people behind the scenes, the filmmakers and storytellers can make a huge difference in just bringing their own lives to screen. Yeah, I think that it's possible, and I think Hollywood is starting to recognize it, but we're just in the beginning, It's history has just been made. She's the first Asian actress to win Best Actress, and Ke Huy Quan the second in since the 70s to win Best Supporting Actor. And yeah, when was the last time we had an Asian win Best Actor, right? So it's still far and few between, and history is just being made. So we're still waiting to see whether Hollywood is going to catch up to the brilliance that already exists.
Representational politics is obviously very important, as you've been talking about, but I think, it also has its limits. Are there systemic changes that you would like to see? And how can we as audiences support those systemic changes?
I think it's easy for audiences just go and pay for those films, right? Buy those films, whether it's streaming, whether it's going to the theaters, and it's also tweeting about it because people actually monitor social media for hashtags, how popular they are. And certainly word of mouth is now how people see the films. After even the Oscars, because I live tweeted the Oscars, I even had people say, "Oh, I've heard a lot about this film. I want to see it." You're just hearing a lot about this film. But, I think I do DEI consulting, and I just talked to a company and none of them had seen it, right? So people still hadn't, but now that it's won the Oscar, they are interested in seeing it. So awards do matter in that way. But the studios themselves, I think that's why the Oscars are important too, because studios, studio heads, people in the industry are watching these, right? And they're reading the industry news, right? So the fact that Variety, Hollywood Reporter, are interviewing Michelle Yeoh and talking about the numbers, the box office numbers, all that is reported. I think that there needs to be an expansion, right? And just the seeing of Asian American actors as beyond just, okay, we have to tell a very Asian story, right? Because their limitations is that it has to have martial arts or it has to be an immigrant story. Like Beef is coming out on Netflix, and it stars Stephen Yin and Ali Wong. And it's about two people who are struggling with depression, struggling with rage and anger. And there's no martial arts. There's some mentions of immigrant parents, but actually you don't even see them. It's just, two people who are second generation, born in the US, first to be born in the US, having to navigate their lives.
I was wondering if there is anything else that you wanted to add, any thoughts that you had but haven't been able to talk about yet.
Yeah, I think the one thing that was actually going around was that talking about Merle Oberon, right? Because she was the first Asian actress to be nominated for Best Actress, but no one knew she was Asian then because she felt she had to hide her South Asian ancestry. And And folks would, I saw some people on social media saying, oh, well, Michelle Yeoh is proud of her Asian ancestry. And I think, like, you know, we don't know what it was like back then. I mean, we can imagine. Well, we know in the sense that we see that white women were being awarded Oscars for playing Asian women, right? Louise Rayner got the lead in The Good Earth over Anna May Wong, who was the leading and the only really big Asian American star at the time. And she all the time would get looked over by yellow face, you know, performances preferred over her actual, you know, Asian American face. And so that was the time that was what Hollywood has been, even all the way up to Scarlett Johansson, you know, playing a Japanese character. That was very, very recent, right? Just 2018, I believe. And so, but it took protests. It took people saying, hey, we don't want Scarlett Johansson playing Asian. We don't want Emma Stone to play a Chinese Hawaiian. We don't want that. It's not okay anymore. And finally Hollywood was like, oh, okay, I guess that's not okay. But they thought it was totally okay all the way, you know, just in the last decade, right? And so it took a lot of protests and awareness. Merle Oberon having to hide her Asian ethnicity and, you know, Asian Americans being proud, but also recognizing that there's still barriers, right? Like, Merle Oberon did that because the industry made it impossible for someone who was Asian to be in projects where they could get nominated. You know, Merle Oberon worked a lot because she hid her ethnicity. And I think that it's great that Michelle Yeoh is being recognized. But again, she's 60 years old, right? It's never too late, but it has been a long time coming. And so I'm just hoping that Stephanie Hsu will have Cate Blanchett's career now, right? But I honestly feel like I don't know if Hollywood is going to do that, because most of the writers are still white. You know, most of the studio execs, almost all of them, are still white. And so I think unless you have authentic people behind the scenes, as well as you know, people of color, as well as people of color who are at the decision-making table, we're not going to see change very quickly.
Thank you for watching. You can listen to my full interview with Nancy exclusively on my Patreon, where you can also get other cool perks like voting on video topics and learning about the subjects of videos early. If you're interested in supporting the channel, check out the link in the description box below. Once again, I'd like to thank Mubi for sponsoring this video. Mubi is a curated streaming service dedicated to elevating great cinema from all around the globe. From iconic directors to emerging auteurs, there's always something new to discover. With Mubi, each and every film is hand-selected by a wonderfully talented team of curators. It's like your own personal film festival, streaming anytime, anywhere. One thing I'd definitely like to recommend that's streaming right now on Mubi is Please Baby Please. When I was researching my Andrea Riseborough video, I saw the trailer for this one and was immediately taken in by it. It seemed so theatrical, colorful, and stylistically adventurous in a way that I don't think we see enough in mainstream cinema these days. I wanted to watch it, but I just didn't really know where I could. Luckily, within weeks, I found out Mubi had picked it up, so I could finally actually see it. And it was exactly what I thought it would be, unafraid of excess and style, strange and whimsical, and a total vehicle for Andrea Riseborough to show off exactly why so many people love her as an actor. This is a great example of why Mubi is such a great streaming service. You're getting so much more than just the same old, same old. Getting a Mubi subscription truly is one of the best things you can do to broaden your taste and expose yourself to great work from all around the world. The good news is you can get a whole month free at mubi.com/BeKindRewind. A world of cinema can be at your fingertips. Get a whole month free at mubi.com/BeKindRewind today.